On my wedding day, an 8-month pregnant woman burst through the church doors screaming, "This man is the father of my child." My father smiled victoriously, thinking he had destroyed my happiness. But when the actress got a good look at his face at the altar, she recognized who really hired her, and what she revealed over the microphone in front of 300 people ended his life forever. My dear ones, my sweet loves, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening. I don't know what time you're watching me, but what matters is that you're here with me, and that already warms my heart. My name is Julia Williams. I'm 72 years young, and I live here in Asheville, North Carolina, the same city where I was born and raised. I'm here in my kitchen, hands deep in dough, literally. I'm making homemade buttermilk biscuits, real Southern-style ones, you know? The smell of butter and buttermilk is already spreading throughout the whole house. And look, is there anything better than this? My granddaughter, little Clara, loves it when I make these. She comes running home from school and already calls out, "Grandma, where are those warm biscuits?" I learned to make buttermilk biscuits from my mother when I was about 12 years old. She had the most skilled hands I've ever seen in my life. She'd make a batch that yielded about 50 biscuits, all perfectly round, all perfect. I'd stand right beside her, trying to imitate, but mine always came out crooked. She'd laugh and say, "Honey, it's not about how pretty they look, it's about how they taste." And look, today I make about 30 biscuits every Saturday morning. I sell some at the neighborhood farmer's market, and the rest stays with the family. It's therapy, you know? Kneading the dough, feeling that soft texture, watching the biscuits rise in the oven. It brings me a peace I can't even explain. My kitchen isn't big, no. It's simple, with wooden cabinets that my late husband, Mark, made with his own hands 40 years ago. The sink is old, but it looks brand new because I take care of it with love. I have my little herb plants in the window, basil, rosemary, mint. When the afternoon sun comes through that window and hits those green leaves, I thank God for having this good life. Oh, before I continue, I wanted to make a special request to all of you watching me now. If you enjoyed getting to know me, please click that subscribe button down below and hit the bell too. It's quick, it's free, and it helps me so much to continue here telling my stories. And tell me here in the comments, from which little town are you watching this, Grandma? And what time of day are you watching? In the morning having breakfast, in the afternoon after lunch, or at night already in your pajamas? I read all the comments, every single one, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you make time to listen to me. Tell me, okay? I want to know everything. Let's make a chain of love here in the comments. Well, but getting back to it. Today, I want to tell you a story that completely changed my life. A story about my wedding day, which should have been the happiest day of my life, but almost became my worst nightmare because of my own father. It's a difficult story, you see, but it's a true story of struggle, of overcoming. And in the end, you'll see that God has a unique way of bringing justice. My father was a wealthy, powerful man, used to commanding everything and everyone. And when I fell in love with a simple young man, a mechanic with calloused hands and a pure heart, my father swore he would destroy that love no matter what. He tried everything, money, threats, blackmail. But he couldn't separate us. Until on our wedding day, he set up a scheme so dirty, so cruel, that I can hardly believe my own blood was capable of doing that. But you know what happened? The shot backfired. The trap he prepared to destroy me ended up destroying him instead. And all of this happened in front of 300 people inside a church on the most important day of my life. So grab yourself some coffee, get comfortable, and come with me on this story, because what I have to tell you will make you believe that the truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes. I was born here in Asheville on March 15th, 1953, in a large house in the downtown area. My father, Dr. Richard Campbell, was a surgeon, owner of a private practice that served all the elite of the region. He came from a traditional Southern family one of those with an important last name and portraits of great-grandparents hanging in the living room. My mother, Elizabeth, was a delicate woman with a soft voice, who had been an elementary school teacher before getting married. After she became Dr. Richard's wife, she gave up everything to be just Mrs. Campbell, as her friends called her. Our house was huge with 2 floors, a garden in front, and an enormous backyard. It had a sitting room with French furniture that no one was allowed to sit on, a library full of books that my father collected but never read, and a private office where he saw the wealthiest patients in town. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Ida, lived in a small cottage out back and took care of everything: the cooking, the cleaning, me and my younger brother Paul, who was born 3 years after me. My father was an imposing man. Tall, always in a suit even at home, deep voice, that manner of someone used to giving orders and being obeyed. He decided everything in our house: what we were going to eat, what clothes my mother would wear to parties, what school Paul and I would attend, even which little friends I could have. I remember once, I was about 7 years old, I brought a classmate home. It was Larissa, daughter of a carpenter. My father came home from work, looked her up and down, and then called me into the bedroom. "Julia," he said in that cold voice, "you're a doctor's daughter. You can't be friends with just anyone. That girl isn't coming back here." And she never did. The next day, Mrs. Ida took me to school and spoke with the teacher not to let Teresa sit next to me anymore. My mother never contradicted my father. Never. She'd lower her head, agree with everything, smile when she had to smile, stay quiet when he yelled. Sometimes I'd see her crying hidden in the kitchen, wiping away tears quickly when Mrs. Ida came in. My father treated her as if she were a piece of home decor, pretty, well-dressed, but without a voice of her own. She had to always be impeccable, with her hair done, dress pressed, heels on, even to stay home. "Elizabeth, you represent my image in this town," he'd say. "You can't let yourself go." My routine as a child was completely controlled. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, have breakfast at the table with cloth napkins and silver utensils. Mrs. Ida would take me to the private Catholic school, St. Teresa's Academy, where only the daughters of Asheville's high society studied. After school, I had piano lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and French lessons on Wednesdays and Fridays. On Saturdays, my father would take me to his practice so I could learn to have the posture of a refined young lady, as he'd say. I'd sit in a chair in the reception area, in a full skirt dress and patent leather shoes, while he saw patients. I couldn't run, couldn't dirty my clothes, couldn't laugh loudly. I had to be a well-behaved young lady. But you know what I loved most? Sunday mornings, when my father would go play golf at the country club and my mother would relax a little bit. She'd take me to the kitchen and we'd make buttermilk biscuits with Mrs. Ida. There, among the flour, buttermilk, and butter, my mother became a different person. She'd laugh, teach me how to knead the dough, playfully dust my nose with flour. Mrs. Ida would tell funny stories from the farm where she'd grown up. Those were the only moments when I saw my mother truly happy. "Enjoy it, child," Mrs. Ida would tell me. "Enjoy it while your father isn't here." I didn't really understand what she meant. I was a child, right? To me, my father was just strict, but I thought that's how fathers were. I only understood the prison we lived in much later. At school, I had few real friends. The girls were all raised like me, proper, well-behaved, daughters of doctors, lawyers, wealthy businessmen. We'd play with dolls during recess, jump rope, but all very delicate, very neat. No climbing trees, no playing ball, nothing that a lady shouldn't do. My brother Paul was younger, but had more freedom than me. Because he was a boy, right? Boys could do anything. He could play ball in the street, could come home dirty, could yell and run. I'd watch him playing in the yard and feel terrible envy. But when I'd ask to play along, my father would quickly cut me off. "Julia, go practice your piano. Girls don't run around like tomboys." When I turned 11, my father started saying I needed to prepare to be a good wife. He'd say he was going to marry me off to a young man from a good family, preferably a doctor or lawyer, someone from the same social position. "You're going to be the perfect wife," he'd say. "Beautiful, educated, accomplished. You'll make a marriage that will bring honor to the Campbell name." Back then, I didn't know yet that my father wasn't preparing me for life. He was molding me to be a piece on his chessboard, just like my mother was. He wanted to control my every step, every decision, every breath, and whoever dared to disrupt his plans would meet the cruelest side of Dr. Richard Campbell. It was at 12 years old, on a Saturday afternoon, that I began to see the first cracks in the perfect image my father had built. I was in the reception area of his practice, as always, when I heard him yelling at a young nurse in the office. The door was ajar. "You owe me respect. I'm your boss." The young woman ran out crying and never came back. The following week, there was another nurse in her place. This happened several times. My father would change staff every 2-3 months, always young women. They always left crying. But I was a child. I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew something was wrong. Something that made my stomach turn when I saw those young women leaving the practice with their eyes red from crying so much. When I turned 18 in March 1971, I was finishing high school at St. Teresa's. My father already had my entire future planned out. I was going to study education, not because I wanted to, but because it was an appropriate field for young ladies. He'd even already chosen the college, UNC Asheville, right here in the city, so I wouldn't need to leave town. "I'm not letting my daughter live alone in any big city," he'd say. "An unmarried girl away from her parents only finds trouble." It was that same year, on a Saturday in April, that my life completely changed. I had gone with Mrs. Ida to do shopping at the local market. My father's car, a brand new black Ford Galaxy, had had a battery problem the previous week, and he'd had it taken to a mechanic he knew. On that day, the mechanic, Mr. Joe, had sent an employee to bring the car back home. I was unloading the grocery bags when I heard the rumble of the Galaxy's engine arriving. I looked toward the gate and saw a young man getting out of the car. He must have been about 26, 27 years old. Dark-haired, black hair a bit long, white t-shirt with grease stains, faded jeans. He had a wide smile, one of those that lights up the whole face. When our eyes met, I felt something strange in my chest, a chill in my stomach I'd never felt before. "Good afternoon, miss," he said, taking a key ring from his pocket. "I came to bring back the doctor's car." "It's good as new, engine purring like a kitten." I stood there like a fool, holding that grocery bag, unable to say anything. Mrs. Ida, noticing my paralysis, came to the gate. "Thank you, young man. You can leave the key here." He handed over the key but kept looking at me. "What's your name?" he asked, with a courage that surprised me. No one had ever asked my name like that, so directly, without being formally introduced first. "Julia," I answered, my voice trembling. "Pleasure to meet you, Julia. I'm Mark Williams. I've been working at Mr. Joe's garage for about 5 years." Mrs. Ida pulled me inside. "Come on, child. Your father doesn't like you talking to strangers on the street." But it was too late. That young man had stirred something inside me. During the following days, I couldn't get him out of my head. His simple way, his sincere smile, so different from the stuck-up boys my father introduced me to at country club parties. 2 weeks later, I made up an excuse to go to Mr. Joe's garage. I told my mother I needed to buy a present for a school friend and that the store was near the garage. In truth, I just wanted to see Mark again. When I got there, he was under a car, only his legs showing. I stood at the garage door without the courage to go in, until he rolled out, saw me, and his whole face lit up. "Julia, what a nice surprise." He got up, wiped his hands on an old rag, and came over to me. We talked for about 20 minutes. He told me he was the son of a retired railroad worker, that he'd grown up in the working-class neighborhood of town, that he'd started working at 14 to help at home. He spoke with such pride about his work, his calloused hands, each engine he fixed. "You know, Julia, mechanics is like medicine," he said, with that smile that melted my heart. "You have to diagnose the problem, understand what's hurting, and cure it. The difference is I cure machines, not people." I fell in love right then and there. Right there, in the middle of that garage smelling of oil and grease, I fell in love with that young man who had grease under his fingernails but had a clean and true heart. We started meeting in secret. He'd pass by the corner of my house. I'd make up excuses to go out, that I was going to church, that I was going to a friend's house to study, that I was going to buy school supplies. My mother suspected. I could see it in her eyes, but she never told on me to my father. I think she was rooting for me to have the courage she never had. For 6 months, Mark and I dated in secret. He treated me with a respect, with an affection I'd never received from anyone. He'd listen to me talk about my dreams, my anxieties. He'd make me laugh with funny stories from the garage. He'd take me to get pie at the diner, to get ice cream in the town square, simple things that to me were heaven on earth. But in October 1971, everything fell apart. I was still 18. One of the friends from the country club, Marlene, daughter of a lawyer friend of my father's, saw me with Mark in the square. The next day, she told her mother, who told my father. I'll never forget that night. My father came home at 9 o'clock at night, outside his normal hours. He came through the front door like a hurricane. "Julia, come here now." I ran down the stairs. My mother was already in the living room, pale, her hands trembling. My father was standing in the middle of the room with that vein bulging in his forehead that appeared when he was angry. "Is it true that you're meeting with a mechanic?" he asked, spitting the word mechanic as if it were a curse word. I was shaking all over, but I looked him in the eyes. "It's true, Father. I'm dating Mark." His hand flew across my face. The slap was so hard I fell to the floor. My mother screamed but didn't move from her spot. She never moved. "You're never seeing that boy again," my father growled. "You're a doctor's daughter. You're going to marry someone from our social class. That mechanic there is nothing but a nobody, a pauper, a gold digger who wants to take advantage of you to move up in life." "That's not true," I shouted, getting up from the floor. "Mark truly loves me. He doesn't want anything from our family." "Oh, he doesn't?" My father gave a bitter laugh. "Every poor man does. It's the easiest way to get money. Marry a rich man's daughter." That night, my father locked me in my room. Literally. Put a lock on the outside of the door. I was trapped for 3 days, eating only what Mrs. Ida brought up to me, using the bathroom in my room, crying until I had no more tears. On the 4th day, my father called me into the library. He was sitting in the leather armchair, smoking a cigar, with that Lord of the Manor pose. "Julia, I made a proposal to your little boyfriend," he said with a cruel smile. "I offered him $5,000 to disappear from your life. Want to know what he said?" My heart stopped. $5,000 was a lot of money back then. "He told me to go to hell," my father continued, and for the first time I saw genuine rage on his face. "Said he wouldn't accept any money, that he truly loved you, that he'd wait for you as long as necessary." My heart filled with hope. Mark had resisted. But my father wasn't finished. So I went further. I talked to the mayor, who's my friend, talked to the sheriff, talked to the businessmen in town. Nobody's going to give that Mark a job anymore. Mr. Joe's garage will lose its contracts with the city if he keeps working there. I'm going to destroy that boy's life until he begs to have never met you. And he did exactly that. The following week, Mark was fired. Mr. Joe cried, apologized, but said he had no choice. Without the city contracts, the garage would go bankrupt. Mark tried to get a job at all the other garages in town. Every door closed. My father had used his power to destroy his chances. But Mark didn't give up on me. He got a job at a garage in Hendersonville, 40 miles away. He worked there all week and came back on Sundays just to see me for 5 minutes in secret. He'd send me letters through Mrs. Ida, beautiful letters saying he'd wait, that he'd fight, that one day we'd be together. It went on like that for 2 years. 2 years of struggle, of hiding, of secret letters, of quick Sunday meetings at Mrs. Ida's house when my father was at the club. I started college studying education in 1972, but my heart was always with Mark. And in 1973, when I turned 21, I made the most important decision of my life. I told Mark I was going to marry him, with or without my father's approval. When I announced I was going to marry Mark in May 1973, the house turned into a battlefield. My father went from rage to psychological terror. He didn't hit me anymore. He didn't need to. His words were worse than any slap. Every day was the same litany. You're going to regret this. He's going to leave you in poverty. You'll go hungry. You'll live in a shack. You'll have to take in laundry for money. A doctor's daughter becoming a mechanic's wife? What a disgrace. The whole town will laugh at you. Your friends will pity you. You'll beg me to come back, but I'll slam the door in your face. He'd repeat this at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner. It was like water torture, each word dripping on my head, trying to corrode me from the inside. My mother was always crying in secret. She didn't have the courage to support me openly, but one afternoon, when my father was at the practice, she came into my room and held my hands. "Honey, I envy your courage," she whispered, with tears in her eyes. "I never had it. I married your father because my family told me to, and since then I've lived in a golden cage. If you truly love that boy, marry him, but prepare yourself. Your father won't make it easy." And he didn't make it easy. He cut off my allowance, forbade Mrs. Ida from giving me any money, locked my closet with a padlock, leaving me with only 3 old dresses. "Get used to poverty," he'd say, with that cruel smile. But the worst wasn't the financial humiliation. The worst was the smear campaign he mounted. He started spreading lies about Mark all over town. He'd say Mark was a thief, that he had a criminal record, that he beat women, that he was a drunk. All lies, all made up. But people believed it. After all, who was going to doubt the word of the respected Dr. Richard Campbell? The families of my college classmates started forbidding their daughters from hanging around with me. "That Julia is getting mixed up with bad people," I heard one mother saying outside class. "My daughter won't associate with her." The priest at the church we attended, Father Augustine, who was my father's friend, called me in for a talk in the confessional. "My child, your father is worried about your soul," he said, with that gentle voice but full of venom. "This boy you've chosen is not of God. God wants you to honor your father and mother. Disobeying your parents is a grave sin. You could be condemning your soul to hell." He used religion against me. Said that if I married against my father's will, I'd be breaking a divine commandment, that my marriage wouldn't be blessed, that my children would pay for my sin. I left that confessional trembling, my head spinning, feeling dirty, sinful. For 2 weeks, those priests' words corroded me. I'd pray every night, crying, asking God for a sign. Was I wrong? Was loving Mark really a sin? It was Mrs. Ida who saved me from that spiral. She came into my room one night and sat on my bed. "Child, listen to what this old woman is going to tell you," she said, holding my hand. "God is love. The God I know doesn't punish those who truly love. That priest is speaking your father's voice, not God's voice. Your father paid for renovations at the church last year. The priest owes him a favor." She was right. Everything made sense. My father was using every weapon he had, money, influence, even the church, to break me. In June 1973, 3 months before the scheduled wedding, my father made his lowest blow. He went to Hendersonville and talked to the owner of the garage where Mark worked. He offered to buy the garage for double its value. The owner, an already old and sick gentleman, accepted. My father bought the garage, and the first thing he did was fire Mark. When Mark told me, I saw defeat in his eyes for the first time. "Julia, I don't know what to do anymore," he said, his voice choked. "Your father has too much power. He's going to destroy me wherever I try to work." I held his face in my hands. "Then we'll leave Asheville. We'll get married and go to Charlotte, to Atlanta, somewhere my father can't reach us." Mark shook his head. "I don't have money even to pay for bus tickets, Julia. I spent all my savings on rent these months. I'll sell my jewelry, I said. I have some gold earrings my grandmother gave me, a necklace, some bracelets. We'll sell everything and leave. That's what we did. I secretly sold my jewelry to a jeweler downtown. I got $1,200, enough money to pay for the simple wedding we'd planned, and still have some left to start a new life far from there. My father found out I'd sold the jewelry. He burst into my room like a wild animal. "You robbed your own family," he yelled. "That jewelry was inheritance. You're a thief, a wretch, a traitor." He threw me to the floor, kicked my ribs. My mother screamed at the door, but didn't come in. My brother Paul, who was 16, tried to hold our father back, but got punched and fell too. "You're not getting married," my father roared. "I'm going to make you regret this. I'm going to destroy this wedding. I'm going to destroy you. You'll beg me for forgiveness on your knees." He locked me in my room again, this time for a whole week. A week without going out, eating only bread and water that Mrs. Ida brought up in secret. A week listening to my father yelling downstairs, making plans, talking on the phone, plotting something. When he finally let me out, there were 2 weeks left until the wedding. He was too calm, way too calm. That's when the real terror began. "Julia, I've thought a lot," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "If you really want to marry that boy, go ahead and marry him. I'm not going to try to stop you anymore." I was suspicious immediately. "What are you planning, Father?" "Nothing, daughter. I just realized you're an adult. You're of age. You have the right to make mistakes. I just want you to have a nice party. After all, you're my only daughter. The whole town has to see that, even with your questionable choices, you're still a Campbell." He paid for the most expensive caterer in Asheville. He rented the First Baptist Church downtown for the ceremony. He had invitations made for 300 guests. He bought my wedding dress, a beautiful dress, white satin with a lace veil. I should have been happy. But a chill ran down my spine every time I saw my father smiling. Mark was suspicious too. "Julia, your father doesn't do anything for free. He's planning something." "But what can he do?" I'd ask. "The church is reserved. The minister agreed to officiate. The invitations have already been sent. What can he do?" We had no idea the level of cruelty my father was capable of. During the week of the wedding, I'd see him on the phone all the time, whispering, closing doors when I passed by. Mrs. Ida told me she'd seen a strange man leaving my father's study one night. A man she'd never seen before, in a black suit, with an unfriendly face. The day before the wedding, during rehearsal at the church, my father arrived and spent time talking with Reverend Augustine. They'd both look at me and Mark, whisper, nod their heads. Mark squeezed my hand. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." But it was too late to turn back. Either we got married the next day, or I'd have to accept defeat and return to the prison of my father's house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept praying, asking God to protect my wedding, not to let my father destroy the most important day of my life. I didn't know that, at that exact moment, a woman was being prepared, rehearsed, instructed, paid, to enter the church the next day and blow my life into 1,000 pieces. September 15th, 1973 dawned beautiful. Blue sky, bright sun, that perfect fall weather in the mountains. It seemed like even nature was celebrating, but my stomach had been churning since I woke up. A bad feeling, heavy, that I couldn't shake off. My mother helped me put on the wedding dress. She cried while fixing my veil. "My dear, you look so beautiful," she whispered. "I wish so much that this day could be perfect for you." "It will be, Mom," I said, trying to believe my own words. Mrs. Ida had done my hair, pinned up in a low bun with fresh flowers. The friends from college who still talked to me, only 3 had come, were there in the room, arranging my train, fixing my makeup. My father entered the room wearing a tuxedo. He had that strange smile again. "It's time," he said. "The church is packed. Everyone waiting to see Dr. Campbell's daughter marry a mechanic. The way he said mechanic, with that contempt, that poison, made my heart tighten. But I lifted my chin. I wasn't going to let him shake me, not on that day. We arrived at First Baptist Church at 2 in the afternoon. The church was really packed, 300 people, maybe more. Half were people my father had invited, Asheville's elite, people curious to see the scandal of the doctor's daughter. The other half were humble folks, Mark's friends, Mrs. Ida's family, neighbors from the working-class neighborhood. When I entered the church on my father's arm, to the sound of the wedding march, I saw Mark there at the altar. He looked handsome in his borrowed suit, hair combed, eyes shining. When our eyes met, he smiled. That smile I loved, full of light, full of truth. And for a second, all my fears disappeared. The ceremony began. Reverend Augustine read the scriptures. We exchanged rings, simple silver rings that Mark had bought with his last paycheck. My father, sitting in the first row, looked at his watch every 2 minutes, as if he were waiting for something. Then the moment came. Reverend Augustine spread his arms and said, with that solemn voice, "If anyone present knows any reason why this marriage should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence in the church was deafening. My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. And then it happened. The double doors of the church burst open with a violent bang that echoed off the walls. Everyone turned around. A woman came running down the center aisle. She was pregnant, very pregnant, huge belly of 8, 9 months. She wore a simple blue dress, disheveled hair, face red from crying so much. "Stop everything!" she screamed, her voice echoing throughout the entire church. "Stop! This wedding can't happen!" The chaos was instantaneous. People getting up from their seats. Murmurs. Screams. My mother put her hand to her chest and collapsed, fainted right there in the pew. Friends ran to help her. I froze at the altar, not understanding what was happening. Mark was white, pale, looking at that woman as if he were seeing a ghost. The woman ran down the aisle, crying, screaming. "This man!" She pointed directly at Mark. "This man is the father of my child. He got me pregnant and abandoned me." The world collapsed. The church walls spun around me. My wedding dress suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Mark shouted, desperate, "I've never seen this woman in my life. This is a lie. Julia, you have to believe me." But the damage was done. The woman reached the altar, still crying, still screaming. "He said he loved me, said he was going to marry me, and when I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, left me alone with this child." That's when I heard my father's voice. He had gotten up from the pew, was walking toward the altar, and in his voice was a satisfaction, a cruel pleasure that chilled me to the bone. "I knew it," my father shouted, pointing his finger at Mark. "I warned you. This scoundrel, this liar, he got this poor woman pregnant and was going to marry you to get access to my money. The wedding is over. Julia, we're leaving now." He climbed the 3 steps to the altar and grabbed my arm forcefully. He was smiling, that victorious smile, that smile of someone who had just won a war. "Come on, daughter. This wedding isn't happening. Thank God I found out in time who this man really is." But it was at that moment that everything changed. The pregnant woman, who had been standing there at the altar crying, suddenly stopped. She looked at my father, looked closely, with wide eyes. The expression on her face changed completely. The crying stopped. The despair turned into something else. Turned into recognition and rage. Pure rage. My father noticed. I saw terror pass through his eyes. For a second, just for a second, he seemed to panic. He tried to drag me out of there. "Let's go, Julia, let's go." But the woman was faster. She grabbed the minister's microphone. The minister tried to take it away, but she held it with both hands, with a strength I didn't know a pregnant woman could have. "Wait!" she shouted into the microphone, and her voice echoed so loud that everyone fell silent. "Wait, everyone!" She looked at me, at Mark, and then at my father. Tears still ran down her face, but now they were tears of rage, not pretense. "Miss," she said, looking directly at me, "forgive me. Forgive me because I was paid. A man paid me $5,000 to come here today, enter this church, and accuse that young man," she pointed at Mark, "of being the father of my baby. I accepted because I'm desperate, because I have no money, no food, nothing." The silence in the church was so profound you could hear a pin drop. 300 people holding their breath. My father tried to shout, "She's crazy! Get her out of here!" But the woman shouted louder, "But the man who paid me didn't tell me the bride's father was you." She turned and pointed her finger in my father's face, an accusing finger, trembling with rage. "You, doctor! Richard Campbell! I worked as a secretary at your practice 3 years ago. Do you remember me? My name is Mary Sullivan. Do you remember now?" My father turned white, white as the altar cloth. He tried to speak, but no sound came from his throat. And Mary didn't stop. She unearthed 24 years of pain, of humiliation, right there in front of everyone. "You hired me 3 years ago," Mary continued, her voice trembling but firm into the microphone. "I had just lost my husband in a railroad accident. I was widowed at 23, 2 months pregnant. I desperately needed a job." She took a deep breath, tears streaming down. The entire church was hypnotized. No one moved. No one breathed. "You were kind at first. You'd have me work late, said I was efficient, paid me overtime, but after 2 months you started making comments about my body, about my clothes. You started touching me when you passed by. You'd touch my shoulder, my waist, always with that excuse that it was accidental." My father tried to move, tried to get out of there, but the shame, 300 pairs of eyes fixed on him, kept him paralyzed in place. "One day, you called me into the office after the last patient had left. You locked the door, started saying I was beautiful, that you could help me financially, that a pregnant widow needed protection. You tried to kiss me. I pushed you away and ran out." Her voice broke, but she continued. "The next day, you fired me, said I was unsuitable for the position. But before I left, you talked to all the doctors in town, to the clinic owners, to the businessmen. You spread the word that I had tried to seduce you, that I was a woman of ill character, that I wanted to scam a rich man. Nobody gave me a job after that. Nobody. My name was tarnished throughout the entire town." People in the church started murmuring. My father tried to speak, his voice coming out thin, desperate. "This is a lie! She's making it up because she wants money." "A lie?" Mary shouted. "Mrs. Ida was there. She was your housekeeper and also worked at the practice doing cleaning. She saw when you cornered me in the office. She heard when you fired me the next day." All eyes turned to Mrs. Ida, who was sitting in the back of the church. Poor Mrs. Ida was trembling, hands on her face. She stood up slowly on shaky legs. "It's true," she said, with a weak voice but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I saw, I heard, and it wasn't just her. There were dozens of young women over the years, all the secretaries, all the nurses. They all suffered harassment. They were all fired when they refused. And I never had the courage to say anything because I was afraid of losing my job, of not being able to support my children." Mrs. Ida broke down crying. And with that cry, the last piece of my father's mask fell away. Mary turned to me again. "Miss, that young man there," she pointed at Mark, "isn't the father of my baby. I don't even know him. The father of my baby died 8 months ago in a construction accident where he worked. I accepted this dirty money because I'm starving, because I'm living in a rented room by charity, because I have no way to support my child who's about to be born." She looked at my father with so much hatred I felt a chill. "When a man approached me a week ago, offering $5,000 to do this act, I accepted. He didn't identify himself, just said I should enter this church at this time and accuse that man," she pointed at Mark, "of being the father of my baby. He gave me half the money up front and said I'd receive the other half later. She took a step toward my father. But he didn't tell me the bride's father was you. If I had known, if I had seen your face before, I never would have accepted. Because you, Dr. Richard Campbell, you destroyed my life. You tarnished my name. You made me go hungry. And now I discover you were trying to do the same thing to your own daughter? Destroy her happiness to maintain control? The silence was sepulchral. My father was cornered. 300 witnesses. No escape. That's when my mother woke up from her faint. Friends had sat her down on the pew, splashing water on her face. She had heard everything, everything. And for the first time in 30 years of marriage, my mother acted. She stood up, slowly, as if each movement hurt. She walked to the altar with firm steps. Her face was transfigured. She was no longer the submissive woman I knew. She was someone else. Someone who had awakened from a decades-long nightmare. She stopped in front of my father, looked him in the eyes for a long moment. And then, with a strength I never imagined she had, my mother slapped him so hard the crack echoed throughout the entire church. 30 years, she said, her voice trembling with rage. 30 years I endured you, your betrayals, your control, your humiliations. I swallowed it in silence to keep this family together, to give a home to my children, but this ends today. She turned to me. Julia, your wedding will continue. Today. Now. With this man you love. She turned again to my father. And you're going to leave this church. You're leaving, because you're no longer part of this family. My father tried to argue, tried to shout, but his voice came out as a pathetic grunt. You can't do this to me. That house is mine. This family is mine. Not anymore, my mother said, with a frightening calm. I consulted a lawyer last week. When I saw you conspiring, plotting something against our daughter, I filed for divorce on Friday. And you're going to leave our house. I'm also going to ask the young women you harassed over the years to file formal complaints. You're going to answer for everything. My father's friends, the businessmen, the politicians who were sitting in the church, they all looked at the floor. No one wanted to be associated with him at that moment. No one went to defend him. Mark, who had been in shock this whole time, pulled me close to him. Julia, you believe me, right? I know, I cut him off, holding his face. I always knew it was a lie. I know you. I know your heart. Reverend Augustine, completely lost in all that chaos, tried to take control. Well, that was extremely unusual. Perhaps it would be better to postpone the ceremony. No, my mother said firmly. The ceremony continues, now. My daughter is getting married today, as planned. She looked at the security guards who were at the church door. 2 large men my father had hired to keep order. You two remove Dr. Campbell from here. He's no longer welcome. The guards looked at each other, undecided. But when they saw that the entire church was against Dr. Richard, when they saw 300 people looking at him with disgust, they went to him and escorted him out. My father left, escorted from the very party he had planned to humiliate me. He left under boos, under looks of contempt, under the weight of all his evils exposed. And you know what I did? I looked at Mary, who was still there at the altar holding the microphone, pregnant, crying, trembling. Mary, I said, thank you. You just saved my life, and I want to help you. I took the purse that was with one of my friends. Inside was the $1,200 left from selling the jewelry. I took out $600 and gave it to her. This is for you to start over, and if you need anything, look for me. We're not going to let you go without. Mary broke down in tears of gratitude. She hugged my legs, crying so hard her whole body shook. Reverend Augustine, still stunned, finally reacted. Well, if everyone agrees, can we continue the ceremony? Yes, please, Reverend, my mother said, and this time without interruptions. And that's how I got married, with 300 witnesses to one of the most surreal days in Asheville's history. The minister read the vows quickly, almost afraid another bomb would explode. We exchanged rings again. Mark kissed me, and the kiss tasted like victory, like freedom, like justice. When we left the church, Mark's friends, the humble crowd from the working-class neighborhood, threw rice. There was no catered reception. My father had canceled everything when he was expelled. But it didn't matter. We went to a local diner in the working-class neighborhood, and they threw together a party with what they had: beer, hot dogs, biscuits. It was the most joyful wedding party anyone could have. Today, my dear ones, 52 years after that day in the church, I live here in the same Asheville where I was born. But it's a different Asheville. I no longer live in that big house downtown. I live in a simple house, a small one, in the Hope Valley neighborhood, very close to where Mark grew up. It's a little 3-room house we bought with a lot of sacrifice 20 years after getting married, when he already had his own auto repair shop. Mark passed away 5 years ago, in 2020, from a heart problem. I miss him every day, his smile, the loving way he'd call me sweetheart, the smell of coffee he'd make every morning. We had 47 years together. We had 3 beautiful children, Michael, Elizabeth, I gave her my mother's name, and Richard. They all grew up watching their father work honestly, watching their mother fight, seeing that true love has nothing to do with money. My life today is simple, but it's mine. Every Wednesday and Saturday, I make my batch of buttermilk biscuits and go sell them at the neighborhood farmers market. I have my loyal customers, Mrs. Zelda, Mr. Gerald, Mrs. Donna. They've been buying biscuits from me for years, and they're more than customers, they're friends. We talk, exchange recipes. I hear about their problems. They hear about mine. My Michael works at a tech company. Elizabeth is a teacher at a public school, followed her grandmother's path. And Richard is a lawyer. Funny, right? My father wanted so badly for me to marry a lawyer, and in the end it was my son who became one. But Richard is nothing like my father was. He's humble, works defending poor people who can't afford to pay, does volunteer work. His paternal grandfather taught him right what true honor is. I have 5 grandchildren. Clara, who I mentioned at the beginning, is 8 years old. There's also John, 10, Marina, 6, little Pete, 4, and baby Alice, 1-year-old. My house is always full of children's noise. They come here every weekend, and it's that beautiful chaos. We make biscuits together in the kitchen, the same thing I did with my mother. Clara already knows how to make them by herself, you know. She's so proud when the biscuits rise in the oven. My mother, Elizabeth, lived with us the last 15 years of her life. After she divorced my father, she had to start over from scratch at 50 years old. She went back to teaching, lived in a small apartment, but she was happy. For the first time in her life, she was free. She passed away in 2010 at 87, sleeping in the hammock here in the backyard with her face at peace. At her funeral, many former students came to say goodbye. Mrs. Elizabeth changed my life, one of them told me, crying. She taught me it's never too late to start over. And my father? Well, my father lost everything. The practice closed when the complaints came to light. There were 13 women who had the courage to speak up. He lost his medical license, lost the house, because he had to pay compensation to some of the victims. He spent the last 20 years of his life living alone in a small apartment, bitter, full of anger. He tried to approach me and Paul several times, but we didn't want contact. Some bridges you burn and there's no way to rebuild. He died in 1998, alone, with no one at his funeral except Paul, who only went because he was his brother. I didn't go. I couldn't. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing there anymore. That man had already died to me long before, on that day in the church in 1973. Paul, my brother, became a history teacher. He broke with our father right after my wedding when he saw the whole truth. We're very close to this day. He lives here in Asheville, and every week we have coffee together. And Mary became one of my best friends. We really helped her, you know? Mark and I got her a job at the shop, doing the administrative part. Her baby was born, a beautiful boy named Ryan. Mark was even his godfather. Mary remarried years later, had 2 more children, is happy. Sometimes she comes to have coffee here at my house, and we laugh, remembering that absurd day at the church. Julia, that day changed my life too, she always says. For the first time I had the courage to face those who hurt me. Today, at 72 years old, I look back and give thanks. I'm thankful for Mark, who was the best husband anyone could have. I'm thankful for my children, my grandchildren, for my simple little house, for my biscuits that feed my family. I'm even thankful for the suffering, because it was what taught me the value of freedom. Asheville is still the same city. The mountains around it, the nice weather, the hot springs. But I'm no longer that scared girl trapped in a big house. I'm a free woman, living the life I chose, surrounded by true love. And you know what's funny? My father wanted so badly for me to have a princess life, full of luxury and status. But the life I have now, simple, humble, honest, is worth more than all the gold in the world. My dear ones, if there's someone listening to me who's going through a similar situation, if you have a controlling father, a manipulative mother, someone in the family who uses power, money, or religion to dominate you, I want you to listen carefully to what this grandma here is going to tell you. Nobody, no person in this world has the right to choose your life for you. It doesn't matter if it's your father, your mother, your husband, your pastor, your boss. Nobody. You were born with free will. God gave you the right to choose your path, and any person who tries to take that away is acting against divine will, not in favor of it. I spent 21 years of my life thinking I had to obey my father in everything, that he knew what was best for me, that questioning him was a sin. But you know what I learned? Blind obedience isn't virtue, it's prison. True love doesn't control, doesn't manipulate, doesn't destroy. True love liberates. When my father used religion against me, when that minister said I was sinning by disobeying my father, I almost gave up. I almost believed God was going to punish me. But God doesn't punish those who truly love. God doesn't punish those who fight for their own happiness. The God I know is a God of love, of freedom, of justice. And for those of you who are parents, listen well. Your children are not your property. They are independent lives that God placed in your temporary care. Your job isn't to control them, it's to prepare them to fly. If you're trying to choose who your child will marry, what profession they'll follow, where they'll live, you're not protecting, you're imprisoning. I could have given up that day in the church. When that woman came in screaming, when everyone started looking at me with pity, when it seemed my father had won. I could have run, canceled everything, gone back home with my head down. But you know why I didn't give up? Because I knew the truth always comes out. Always. It may take time, it may hurt, but it comes. My father set up his own destruction. He was so arrogant, so blinded by power, that he didn't realize he was digging his own grave. And it's always like that. Those who plant evil reap storms. So my advice to you is, don't be afraid to face those who oppress you. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to disappoint people who only love you when you obey. That's not love. It's manipulation, and you deserve more. You deserve true love, free, without chains. And now, my loves, I need to make a special request of you. If this story touched your heart, if you know someone going through a similar situation, subscribe to this channel now. Hit that bell. It's very important. Because the more people hear stories like this, the more people will have the courage to free themselves. More people will understand they're not alone. And leave me a comment down below with just one word. Freedom. That's it. Only those who watched until the end will understand. I want to see how many people made it here with me, how many people had the courage to listen to this entire story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Save a life. Save a heart. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Because there's someone out there who needs this message today. There's someone who's thinking about giving up, about going back to prison, about accepting manipulation. And that person needs to know that it's possible to live free, live happy, live in truth. Thank you so much for listening to me until the end, my dear ones. You've warmed this grandma's heart. Until the next video, and remember, truth always wins. Always. A big kiss from someone who loves you. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read every single comment and love hearing from you all around the country.